Hi, and welcome to Not Just Talk Therapy Podcast. We are your hosts.
This is Leslie, a holistic psychotherapist.
And I'm Britany. I'm the girl next door.
Talk therapy is great, but we believe it's not enough. We examine the body, mind, and soul and challenge you to think differently, see things in a holistic way to approach and resolve life's challenges.
Join us for a fun and meaningful conversation and learn tips and insights on how to approach life's complex issues. We are so excited for you to tune in. Hello, Mind Warriors. Thank you so much for tuning in to Not Just Talk Therapy Podcast, Episode 4. I hope you are feeling strong and grounded and wonderful and powerful. Thank you so much for being here with me today. My name is Britany, and I'm co-host of Not Just Talk Therapy Podcast with Leslie. And today, my first solo episode with you all. Amazing. Yay! So excited. As you may have listened to episode 2, Leslie dives into a bit of her story. And if you haven't listened yet, definitely go check it out. I will be diving into an overview of my life so you can connect with me on a more intimate and deeper level, understanding a bit more about my journey and how the hell I ended up here. How I also ended up becoming a yoga instructor and why Leslie and I started this podcast. So this will kind of be like a raw overview about my life, and I'll go into more specifics in future episodes. I will explain my journey of self-healing and how I am learning to master my mind and emotions, and how I'm living my life with intention in order to fulfill my purpose and truly be happy. My hope for you, all beautiful souls joining me today, is for you to learn self-love, become emotionally, mentally, and physically strong, feel inspired, energized, and motivated, and find your purpose and happiness. And what I mean by this is I want you to love yourself and believe you are enough. I want you to perform at your peak performance emotionally, mentally, and physically. I want you to conquer your life by feeling inspired, energized, and motivated. I want you to trust the universe and know that it supports you and has your back. I want you to listen to your heart and follow your intuition. I want you to live your life with intention to fulfill your purpose. And I want you to live the happiest life of your freaking dreams. So my quote that I kind of live by and that I'll share with you a lot on this podcast, finding true happiness and fulfilling your true purpose is living a meaningful life. So I'll begin going down memory lane. I'm originally from the West Coast, California girl in the house. I was born in San Luis Obispo, California, but I moved throughout my childhood and into adulthood, giving me a full spectrum of people and places. My childhood from the outside looked very stable, and in many ways it was, meaning all my physical needs were met. I had food on the table, I had a bed to sleep in, I had routine, I had school, I had friends, I had sports. But I also faced many adversities, and my family was broken. My parents got divorced when I was 4. And when that happened, my dad gained full custody of me. So I lived with my dad and my stepmom. My life seemed very normal from the outside looking in. I lived in upper middle class areas in places such as Manhattan, Boca Raton, Beverly Hills, Honolulu, and Dallas. I attended both private and public schools, and it truly appeared I had a good quality life. In many ways I did, but also my sister and I suffered years of mental abuse, childhood trauma, and emotional neglect. And at the time, I didn't realize it, but looking back now, I understand the challenges we faced. For me, this led to years of living to survive instead of living to thrive. Living in a state of mental and emotional stress, fear, and anger. And even when there wasn't stress, I sought it out or created it because that's how I felt most at home and most myself. And I did this a lot in my adulthood. I found ways to numb myself, and mostly through alcohol and instability. When children experience divorce, they can react in different ways because we are all different. And in some children, they react with understanding, right? And others, they struggle from the transition. But either way, it's always difficult once you realize that all you knew is now broken and lost. I was 4 years old when this happened, so I'm not sure what I really thought or what I understood was happening. But I think what came after the divorce really affected me more long term. I experienced childhood mental and physical abuse and emotional neglect. Our childhood is what shapes us to become who we are as adults. And this is why our childhood is of such great significance. And Leslie and I will dive deeper into this in future episodes on the importance of childhood and how childhood trauma affects people for life. As a mom of 2, I have worked hard to break that cycle of abuse. I'm not a perfect parent, but I am definitely a parent who has progressed past the ways of my own upbringing. My children are loved, emotionally supported, and have self-worth. So my daughter's 5 and my son is 12. And a little side note, so I asked them the other day if they love themselves, just out of curiosity. And they both answered yes. I asked them separately and they both answered yes. And literally this gave me all the feelings because seriously, I never felt that way growing up. And it's so important. It's so important to live a happy and successful life to feel self-value. There's definitely a part of me that wishes my parents did not get divorced or that I was abused and neglected as a kid, obviously. I think, not always, but I think sometimes I looked back and was like, what if they stayed together? What if this didn't happen? But through my healing, there's also a part of me who appreciates the lessons I've learned through my process of healing. And at this point, I'm not really sure I would ever want to give those lessons up because it is through these lessons and through this journey that I've learned so much and I've developed so much and I've learned so much about myself. I don't know if you've ever felt this or if you've ever noticed this in your own life, but those moments when everything is wonderful and we enjoy them and we want to stay in that moment, we don't really develop and grow because those moments feel so good and right. We don't want anything to change, right? But in the moments of adversity, when we are dealing with struggles, those are the moments where we open up. Those are the moments we evolve. Those are where we expand and even sometimes pivot our own trajectory of our own lives. And to me, those are the moments where I feel most alive because that's where I feel most closely connected to myself. I don't know if that makes sense, but I've often seen in other people when they're going through a challenging time and they go through that challenge, it almost seems like a butterfly comes from the other side. Like they go through this challenge and then all of a sudden you just see a change. And I see this with one of my friends right now. She was going through such a hard time and she did the work and she's doing the self-healing and now I see this like flower bloom. Ultimately, through me sharing my story, I want to influence and inspire you and all the Mind Warrior listeners out there to live your best life. And what I mean by this is I want you to develop a deeper connection and understanding to yourself. I really, really want this to be impactful for you. I want you to become the happiest person you know. Literally, the happiest fucking person you know. Can you imagine that? I want you to live with intention and purpose. And I know 10,000% that if I can climb myself out of the dark hole I was in, I know you can too. And no matter where you are in life, maybe you're not in the hole, but maybe you're just walking or skipping on the side. That's fine. But I want you to have the tools to fly over that hole. And if for some reason you do fall in, I want you to know how the fuck to get out. Like I said, I want you to be inspired. I want you to be the happiest person you know. I want you to learn the importance of being the love of your own life. I want you to fulfill your dreams, your purpose. I want you to live with passion and love. And with Leslie's knowledge and expertise, we also want you to master your mind and emotions so you can master your life. So back to my story. After my parents got divorced, my dad married another woman who was mentally and physically abusive to me and my sister. So about 10 years, basically the length of my dad's relationship with her. She started out very nice, but it was just the manipulation that she used to win over my dad and his bank account. And I remember she started giving us chores. It started off small, but it soon became more and more and more, where eventually we were living this Cinderella story. as I mentioned earlier, when my parents divorced, my mom did lose custody. So from around the ages of 4 to 13, I was mentally and physically abused and emotionally neglected. And then the emotional neglect continued on through adulthood. My true understanding of what happened didn't occur to me until much later into my adulthood. As a child, teenager, and early adult, I always thought there was something wrong with me, that I was the problem. I was so eager for acceptance and love, and I always lived in a constant state of stress. Every day it was something. I was screamed at and I was physically abused. I was told I was nothing. I was told I was wrong. I was told I was stupid. I was told I was worthless. Day after day, year after year, I was told I was a nobody. I was told I would never amount to anything. I grew up hating myself. I grew up with no confidence and low self-esteem. I developed codependent characteristics. I chronically neglected myself in order to gain outside acceptance and approval. I only knew chaos. And I'll dive deeper into how these characteristics played out in areas of my life in future episodes. This affected me as an adult because I was someone who had no self-worth. I was constantly living in survival mode and subconsciously seeking pandemonium. The convergence of all these things was a complete disaster. This was learned behavior, but it was all that I knew. So to me, this was an understanding of how things in relationships were meant to work. When things were quiet, they seemed boring, and I would go out and create disorder. So Whitney Goodman explains this really well. She says, if you grew up around chaotic relationships, you may think chaos is excitement and passion, love is control and obsession, and safety is boredom. So I really connected with that, and I also really connected to what Nicole LaPera said about her own upbringing. The steady stream of hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, had all of us in an emotional cycle of highs and lows, of chaos and then lifeless exhaustion or irritability, unconsciously seeking it. I usually did this as an adult, though, through romantic relationships where I'd push or nitpick, and when nothing was happening, I was bored. I'd become accustomed to my body's stress response. It was how I learned connection. It's when I felt like me. It's when I felt like me. Wow. So I did this too, and this was in my teenage years through adulthood because of the childhood trauma that I, endured. And in future solo episodes, I will go into more detail of ways I did this. So back to growing up, fast forward to my teenage years. After living in a household with an abusive stepmom, when I was 13, my dad had an affair with a woman who was 11 years older than me and 20 years his junior. So my dad and my abusive stepmom ended up getting a divorce. And this was back in 1999. So I remember one time having a very open discussion about this affair with my dad on a family trip to the beach. And as odd as the openness of this conversation was, I was literally so freaking happy. To me, this meant, shit, I'm escaping the abuse. I could finally be free from it all. So once we finally moved out, it went from abuse and living in a rigorous and unyielding household to absolute complete freedom. My sister and I could do anything we wanted. So as a 13-year-old, entering your teenage years, and at first this seemed like a dream come true, right? Especially after the abuse. But looking back on my life, I understand that this had a negative impact on me as well. In the next decade, I was emotionally neglected and abandoned. I would stay over at my friends' houses for weeks at a time. And as a child, I would often think, where in the hell is my family? Why don't my parents want to know what I'm doing? They never ask me about school. I never have dinner with them. Why don't they want to spend time with me? So for example, when I was in high school, I was 17 years old. My dad moved out to California and I was living by myself. And one day, I was working out at the gym and I ended up having a lactic acid buildup in my calves. And the next day, my calves were literally the size of cantaloupes. They were so big. And they were so swollen, and I couldn't walk. I couldn't get to school. So a friend of mine had to bring me crutches. And then I ended up driving myself to school, and I asked the high school football coach, who I never met, never had a relationship with, don't know anything about him. I had to go to the high school football coach and ask if I could sit in the ice bath that they offered to the players. And I remember in this moment, I felt so sad and so alone. And I know it may seem insignificant or irrelevant or, small, but to me, it was really impactful because I just felt that loneliness, and I had no mom to take care of me. I had no dad to comfort me. I was just on my own to navigate through life by myself, basically. So to recap, from 4 to 13, I was mentally weakened by abuse. I had low self-esteem, lack of confidence, and I seeked others' acceptance. I was emotionally abandoned and neglected from 13 on, having no guidance or love from either parent. And I had feelings of, loneliness and being alone and feeling lost. And I felt like that much of my life. And I always thought that this was because of me. I thought this life was because of the way that I was. So when I was in high school through early adulthood, I was depressed and had little concept of self-worth. There were many moments in my life that I just remember wanting to die. I lived by myself since I was 17, but was rarely home starting at the age of 13. And so I have a son now. My son is 12, and this just blows my mind, for real. I have no idea how I managed at that age being away from home so often. I couldn't imagine my son being away from me that much or being away from the home that much. And as an adult, I ended up getting married very young when I was about 20 years old, and I had my son the following year when I was 21. And looking back now, I think I was subconsciously trying to recreate a family that was missing for me when I was growing up. Throughout my 20s, I was trying to find my way, but looking in all the wrong places. I was always seeking outside validation and looking at the external world for happiness. And guess what? It always fell short, right? So I ended up getting a divorce, and I'll talk to you more about this in a future episode. But it wasn't really until I met my current partner that I had someone in my life really challenge me to get better. It wasn't always easy, and a lot of our relationship has been hard because of these pushes, but it did help me get uncomfortable with my ways. And Leslie and I will talk about relationships and the complexities that lie within them in future episodes, so make sure you tune in. Internally, I felt like I wanted to unleash my real self to the world. I felt trapped. And that's what healing does. It gets you closer to the realist, most authentic version of yourself. And I remember this one time my partner said to me, and this was during a time we had split, or I think we were just about to split, but we were going through a hard time. And he said something like this: I know she's in there. I see glimpses of her. But right now she's afraid and guarded and angry. And there's a shell around her that is trapping her from showing us her beauty. And I remember hearing that, and it broke my fucking heart because I knew exactly what he meant. Because I felt it. I saw it in me. I was broken, and I was bitter, and I was filled with rage and anger. And ultimately, I do know that it was me who had to do the work to heal her. But I do thank him for helping me not give up on myself. He is an earth angel to me. I don't know if any of you have those earth angels, but the angels that guide us in some way, maybe someone that has helped you along the way, made an impact in your life, big or small. It could be someone really close to you or someone not so much. But yeah, I've definitely had a few of those along the way in my life. And then basically, I think the next day he moved out and we broke up. No, but I think back on that day, and that's when I think I really took my self-healing to another level. I think I was ready to get myself better, and I knew that he was right, and I was over the pain, and I was over the victimization, and I was over being stuck emotionally and mentally, and I just wanted to be happy. I knew there was better out there, and I felt ready for it, but I didn't know exactly what that journey was going to look like, but from my childhood experiences, I became aware of my own behaviors, and I also became hyper aware of other people's behaviors. And I think growing up the way I did, I was always trying to identify the situation that I was in or going to be in, and I innately became hyper alert. So I'm a very observant person, and I developed an interest in understanding why we behave in certain ways. And as I'm sure many of you are too, I'm on a path of finding ways to feel better, always, We all want to feel better. And at first, this was by numbing myself. So I couldn't feel anything. But as I get older and happier and more whole, I use a holistic approach. And I get excited about anything health and wellness. If it truly makes me feel better, I'm all for it. And that's always the goal, right? To feel better, to be our best, to be at our best. And as we will discuss in Not Just Talk Therapy podcast, to feel better wholly means mind, body, and soul. And sometimes it takes different modalities for us to fully heal and live our best lives. And everyone's different. But we have to massage all areas of ourselves. Our mind, our emotions, our physical, our spiritual, our lifestyle, our relationships, everything. It all works together as one whole. And this is why we go back and say talk therapy isn't enough, and why it takes different techniques to live our best lives. I have been in talk therapy before, mainly for relationships, but it never fixed me. It helped me, and it can be helpful to talk things out and get it out into the world. And I think it may be helpful for some more than others, right? But I also think you have to meet the right person. So to get the most out of it, you have to find the right person. It's kind of like dating, right? The therapist has to be compatible. So for me, personally, I feel like I transformed more when I found yoga. And again, this is why it takes different modalities to really heal ourselves and find what works for us. And the one modality that really worked for me was yoga. And maybe yoga isn't your thing, but for me it is. I don't know, do any of you practice yoga or meditate? If you do, maybe you can relate to me. I first started to practice yoga to reduce stress. Literally, lay me down on a mat, let me be there, leave me alone, don't bother me. And then I started specifically just to calm me down and feel less stressed. I was all about the restorative practice. And then the more I practiced, it became more of a physical practice for me, like a physical fitness. And then it became more of a spiritual development. So I got into power vinyasa, and those classes are definitely hard. And after the physical, it kind of led me into this spiritual development. And we will discuss benefits and effects of physical movement. We'll dive into spirituality and topics like the universe and stuff in future episodes. But seriously, I remember one time in my practice, I was in a flow and I just started to cry. I don't know why I was crying, but it was like this energy was moving in my body and it was releasing. And it was a healing moment for me. And then another time I was in a flow, and after the flow, I laid in Shavasana, and it literally felt like I just had an orgasm. I was like exhausted. It was amazing. It was like this amazing feeling. And it wasn't like a physical orgasm, but it was like I was feeling this euphoric moment. I remember it so clearly. It was like beautiful. I knew I was in love at that moment. I knew the universe had my back. I knew I was good and well and wonderful. And in that moment, it was like all this release of all that I did know, the hurt, the loneliness, the abandonment, the fear, the anger, the neglect. It was all replaced by love and connection to all and happiness. And mostly, I felt such inner peace in that moment. And I remember thinking after that, like, whoa, what the fuck just happened to me? And so now I look at inner peace as such a big part of what health is to me. I remain committed to my own path of self-discovery, healing, and finding my true purpose in life. And as I begin to become more in tune and in alignment with the frequency of the universe and myself, I know my purpose is to help people. So as I continue to grow, my views of health and wellness continue to expand and evolve. And I'm so humbled and excited for you to be on this journey with me. I want you to know I'm definitely a work in progress, so bear with me, but my hope is to help you grow at the same time. And before, I felt like I had to wait to share my story or share myself with the world because I had to be an expert or perfect or fully fixed, But through my own transformational journey, I understand that I am worthy of impacting others now. So here we are together. And again, my focus on this podcast is really to crack our hearts and souls wide open together. So I'll be talking a lot about self-love, emotional, mental, and physical mastery, feeling inspired, energized, and motivated, and finding purpose and happiness. And again, what I mean by that is loving yourself and believing you're enough, performing at peak performance emotionally, mentally, and physically, conquering your life, feeling inspired and energized and motivated, and living with intention to fulfill your purpose and live the happiest life of your freaking dreams. So going back to my quote, finding true happiness and fulfilling your true purpose is living a meaningful life. You may have had some trying times in your life, and you can relate to me on some level. Or you may have had a pretty good life, so it may be hard for you to understand to some degree where I'm coming from. But at the end of the day, we all suffer. We all have struggles, whether they're major or minor. And through this podcast, I hope you will gain a better understanding of who I am as your podcast host and learn how to master your mind and emotions in order to live purposefully and be in alignment with true happiness. And I just want to end with a special Sanskrit prayer today. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all beings everywhere be happy and free. And may the thoughts, words, and actions of my own life contribute in some way to that happiness and to that freedom for all. Thank you so much for listening to a little bit about my journey and how I ended up here. Check out our website and show notes to recap on this episode or any other episode. Thank you so much. See you next week. Thank you for listening to today's show. If you love what you heard, please subscribe, write us a 5-star review on iTunes, and follow us on Instagram at mastering.your.mind.
You can find more information from the show on our show notes on our website, notjusttalktherapypodcast.com, all spelled out. And if you're interested in working with us one-on-one, our contact info is also on our website.
Thank you again, and see you on next week's episode.